I'm Nancy, a 24-year-old housewife, and I'm married to Tom, a 40-year-old. Ours was just a quirk of fate, nothing like the magical romance you find in a movie, more like a May-December relationship. When I got a job in Tom's father's construction company, fate came together. The patriarch of the company took a fancy to me and kept pushing me to marry his son. That was the plan. Tom had no chances for a decent marriage, but he was to inherit the company's throne. The patriarch worried about the company's fate since he thought it would fail without a successor. Knowing my father from the business world, Tom's father asked me directly for my hand in marriage. My family has a long history in building. Therefore, our businesses have been entwined for many generations. Remembering the help Tom's father had given him when he was a boy, my father was unable to completely reject the suggestion. Nonetheless, my father insisted on a courtship period to honor the age difference. Before tying the knot, he wished for Tom and me to establish a bond. Tom accepted my father's demands after realizing how important the marriage would be to his rise to prominence. That's how Tom and I went on a ton of dates, dinners, films, and shopping trips. Our relationship became stronger with time, and we were persuaded that getting married was the right move. Before long, we were engaged. However, as we were celebrating our upcoming marriage, Tom's father's condition worsened, and he was forced to live in a hospital. Tom's business commitments kept him busy, and my mother was unable to drive, so I was left to take up the caregiving duties. In the role of his fiancée, I was forced to take on the responsibility of taking care of my sick father-in-law. My future mother-in-law was in the hospital and didn't take long to remind me of my responsibilities as the family's carer. She also chastised me for my poor housekeeping abilities, an obvious flaw for someone who was supposed to marry into the family. She said, "Nancy, hurry. The morning visiting hours are ending. Take him," with a promise on her tongue. I complied, putting on an odd smile and hustling to get the car started, even though I felt more like a servant than a potential daughter-in-law. As I took care of my father-in-law, days seemed to pass by without any distinction. Then one day my mother-in-law suggested that I move in with her, pointing out the ease with which I could take care of him. The idea of commuting back and forth between my parents' house and the hospital was a burdensome one, even though it seemed premature. I reluctantly consented, explaining that I would probably be moving in shortly anyhow. I reasoned that since my father-in-law's health wasn't getting better, our wedding would have to wait until after I moved in. Although there were no rumors of Tom's previous relationships, sharing a roof with him exposed some hard realities. He was 40 years old and had never been in a serious relationship, which became apparent as his frugal spending and fixation with money emerged. Tom kept a close eye on our spending, questioning every penny we spent on dinners, dates, and even petrol. In the meantime, the atmosphere at home was unpleasant due to my mother-in-law's constant harsh sarcasm and her tendency to make fun of me. But when it came to his mother, Tom's generosity knew no limitations. He ignored her lavish spending on opulent vacations and fancy goods. I found myself wondering if Tom's steadfast love for his mother was obsessive, which made me second-guess the rush with which I had consented to enter into this complex relationship. I figured that living with them before I got married would help me get to know their peculiarities and dynamics as a family. However, thinking about my father-in-law's circumstances and my father's unwavering love for me left me speechless. That day, my mother-in-law treated me like a housekeeper, which annoyed me as I got ready to transport my sick father-in-law to the hospital. His condition had gotten worse since the day before. "Nancy, are you ready for breakfast? You cleaned yesterday in a terrible manner." With her eyes fixed on the TV, she implored, "Can you hurry up and just do it?" Tom sat still next to her. "I apologize, but I'm short on time. I had to bring your spouse to the hospital," I said, trying not to lose my cool in the face of mounting annoyance. "That being said, shouldn't you have risen sooner?" "I also have to leave," she responded, not realizing the pressure her words caused me to feel. "Make us breakfast before you leave." I couldn't help but wonder why they were so indifferent to their own father and spouse, and why they couldn't manage some things on their own. "Father-in-law, just a little patience, please," I muttered, "I'll be done in a minute," as I hurried to make breakfast and give it to Tom and my mother-in-law. I helped my father-in-law get upright, and only then, after tending to their requirements, did I focus on him. "I apologize for having you put in so much work," he said. "I have to apologize to your father as well," just before passing out. "Are you okay?" I questioned, running to his side with a great deal of burden on my shoulders as panic took hold of my heart. My mother-in-law and husband continued eating breakfast as if nothing had happened, and I was horrified. The situation was so overwhelming that my mind went blank, but I was brought back to reality by the ambulance's blaring sirens. "Sorry, Nancy, I have to leave you to handle the rest," my husband hurriedly said as the ambulance pulled up a few minutes later. "Please lock up. I have to get to work." They then left, leaving my father-in-law ill and me by myself. He had come to when we got to the hospital, and they quickly hospitalized him. By the time the doctor's explanations and hospital procedures were over, it was getting dark outside. My father-in-law sulked as we sat on his hospital bed. "I want to tell you something, Nancy, as a token of my apology for subjecting you to my ungrateful son and wife." He apologized for pressuring me to marry Tom, saying, "I've been too busy at work to really understand what's been going on at home." Soon after, my mother-in-law and Tom came into the room and asked how my father-in-law was doing. Their anxiety was obvious. I told them, seeing them as family, "He'll be okay." The doctor informed them he just needs some rest and he'll be out of the hospital soon. But at least in my view, Tom's disapproval and my mother-in-law's displeasure seemed to be constant. A few days later, while I was getting ready to see my father-in-law, I was given a divorce decree by my mother-in-law and Tom, which had lines that were green. "Isn't that what you've been wanting the entire time? Married a person who is so much older than you? However, your strategy was foiled," Tom scoffed, admitting that he had heard the exchange at the hospital. "We won't give you a smell, but my father meant to leave you a chunk of his inheritance. Just go file for divorce and be done with it," he spit out angrily, using foul language. I was astounded. I was caught off guard by his unexpected outburst. "What?" I stumbled, finding it difficult to understand the treachery that was happening to me. Tom insisted, unfazed by my incredulity. "Just go to the government office. We'll split the estate left to my father evenly. Nobody else is available to share it with, and there isn't enough money for a wife who can't even take care of her own home." I heard some terrible words, even though my father-in-law was about to be released from the hospital. Their chat gave me the creeps because it seemed like they were expecting him to die. "How are you able to be so callous? He is your relative," I objected, attempting to remove their dark vibe and their implication that I wanted their inheritance. "He'll get better when he gets home." "Don't make fun of me by making such claims. I'm furious and indignant, and inheritance is the last thing on my mind," I shot back. "This marriage was never my desire to begin with." I made my way to the municipal office with determination. I immediately needed to cut all links with these folks and remove them from my life after filing the divorce papers. However, the confused look on the receptionist's face upon submission suggested an unforeseen problem. "Your name didn't match our records," she stated, causing me to become more confused until I gave my maiden name, which fit the data exactly. I was completely shocked to learn that we were not officially married. I was enraged by my mother-in-law's casual remark when I asked for clarification. "Oh, I completely forgot I've had it all this time," she casually said, her lack of accountability irritating. I was powerless to resist. "You treated me like a servant by purposefully withholding it, but now you act as like it's a non-issue." I lost my temper, fury exploding within me. Her laughing on the opposite end of the queue just made me angry. She obviously had no regrets. "You don't have to worry about your inheritance share," she said with a laugh that was laced with contempt. Tom laughed so loudly that it made me irritable and eased my boiling anger. I wasn't going to allow their lies get away. I begged my father to come with me to the government office over the phone. After giving a brief explanation, I picked up the phone and saw my father, clearly surprised, hurry in.
I held the person who had helped me a few moments ago accountable in front of my father, demanding an explanation. Equipped with a proof of residency, I discovered the reality. Not only was my name missing, but my address had also stayed the same. During my stay in that house, I had been tricked into thinking that my address had not changed because I had registered my marriage. Nevertheless, I had to bear the title of Tom's wife and put up with constant hardship. The
inheritance problem was brought up, and I was instructed to get out right away. I was reeling from the injustice of it all, and even my always well-mannered father was furious. We rushed to the hospital together to see my father-in-law. When we arrived, my father-in-law saw my father and said something courteous, not realizing the fury that was building inside of us. My father-in-law's demeanor changed from one of calmness to irritation as my father narrated the circumstances. We met in his hospital room and discussed the consequences for Tom and my mother-in-law, who hadn't seen him since he was admitted. Unexpectedly, Tom's father approached my father with a solution after realizing that Tom was not the right person to take on the role of family heir. His intention was to give my father the job of protecting his company. Fortunately, Tom's father's company was profitable, so there would be no loss in merging with my father's company. Tom's father considered it a good result as long as the business survived in one way or another. Tom's personality would probably cause clients and staff to leave if he took over, which would be disastrous for the business. Given this, it was obvious that Tom was unfit to be in a leadership position. I came to a conclusion that I thought would be crucial to the future of our family. That was the best way to protect the business from being taken over by our less ethical kin. Tom's father burst out laughing and declared he was getting a divorce. Her obsession with money is so strong that she ignores her husband in favor of living a luxurious lifestyle. She's getting what she deserves, he said, looking at me and my father for approval. We looked at each other knowingly, agreeing in silence that this was a just punishment. The next day, the lawyers and accountants my father had hired went into action. We carefully considered our options and ultimately opted to combine Tom's father's business with ours while keeping the family name. Removing Tom's vice presidency, we fired him right away and replaced him with a bright young executive from inside. Tom and his mother would be caught off guard when their father returned to work and made the final decisions. And so, the countdown to their demise began. After 2 weeks, my father-in-law recovered completely and was released from the hospital with my father at his side. After completing the necessary paperwork, I took him home in my car. My mother-in-law was noticeably missing when I arrived, and Tom was deep in his work as usual. It was obvious how heartless they were. They had no idea how much they would regret their callous deeds the next day. When I got back to my old job the following morning, there was a new vice president in charge. At a morning meeting, Tom's father gave an update on the company's situation and upcoming adjustments. My mother-in-law was carrying a divorce decree, and Tom was holding a letter of termination. They were both in disbelief. "What's going on, Dad?" "What were you thinking?" Tom cried out, shocked by the abrupt change in circumstances. The abrupt explosion took me by surprise. I was unaware of this. How on earth is this happening so quickly? What were you thinking? Shocked by the sudden turn of events, I cried out. The sight of Tom and his mother-in-law yelling in front of everyone caused the entire conference room to become silent. But Tom's father held his composure in the face of turmoil. He smirked and said, "That's exactly the kind of lunacy I was hoping for," his eyes glimmering with delight. Accusations erupted as soon as they saw me. "You are it. Did you not do something, simply because you wouldn't receive your inheritance?" They pointed accusingly. "I took no action at all. All of this was initiated by you guys." I retaliated, getting more and more irritated at their unfounded charges. Tom's father sensed the tension and spoke up in a stern tone. "That's sufficient. You're interfering with the early meeting. Outside, both of you," he said, his eyes steely. Tom and his mother-in-law were reluctantly led away by staff members who worked nearby. When they were calm again, they asked me and Tom's father for forgiveness. However, I chose to disregard their meaningless apologies and had no intention of accepting them. They persisted, but eventually they stopped coming to the company. Tom's father requested them to leave their home and reinforced security measures to prevent them from entering. They currently live close to their previous home in a modest flat. I've returned to a quiet life, working in an office in the interim, while my father, still filled with rage, is getting ready to sue Tom and his mother-in-law for damages caused by their behavior. Their lives have descended into hopelessness, which is a far cry from the peace I now experience. Their reckoning appears to have started, and although I have no malice towards them, I also won't offer assistance. Maybe they've discovered the hard way that what one does to others will eventually come back to haunt them.